the book review podcast where the books are split in two and figuring out just what is going on is a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we're finishing up Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. I'd like to start this episode with two formal apologies. One is for the sound quality of my microphone on the last episode. Just podcast flub. I just had the wrong microphone on. My second formal apology is to Taylor for telling her that her theory about people existing in different timelines could not and would not happen in this book.
You know, I was gonna demand this later in the episode, but I'm glad you realized your mistake.
Oh man. I really was like the exact thing that I was like, this is of all the things that we've said in the episode, this is the thing that could not happen. And of course it did.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, I thought the same. I also was like, we'll just have a little bit of fun, you know, that's what we're here for. And to my surprise, exactly what I predicted is what happened. I was elated. I've never been so excited to read. Oh my god, the best moment of my life.
It was shocking, honestly. I was like, oh, of course, you know, like I should have just kept my mouth shut instead of naysaying, but I was shocked to see that that's exactly what had happened. I mean, among other things, but yeah, good call. I mean, I think we both had some good calls, but you especially with that one. You really like hit the nail on the head.
From that one fucking McDonald's line too. That was all I needed.
I know. Well, yeah, I think one thing I really enjoyed about the book is that no line went wasted. I feel like every reference came up as like a good reason. I mean, everything was really like they called every line back out and were like, this line is relevant to the thing that's happening right now because of this, right? Like everything added up and was given a reason for existing, which maybe was a little redundant, but was like it was clever. It was good.
Yeah, and of course there's some stuff like we weren't able to figure out because they didn't provide that information, which we can talk about more later. And some might say the ending of this book is a little too exposition-y, but honestly, I was kind of living for it. Like, I didn't mind it.
This March chapter especially gave us a lot of information. But yeah, I agree. I was like, oh, I'm liking these little peeks into everyone's lives, and I kind of like the method like of her looking at the X's where they are, quote, buried and kind of getting a peek into their heads and their experiences. I wasn't expecting that, and I wasn't expecting the sort of solution, I guess, to the puzzle of finding the key would also be the literary tool used to give us all of this information. So I thought that was super clever.
Yeah, it was good for sure. But before we jump to the end, let's start at the beginning of the third semester, I suppose.
Yes, of the half, yeah.
Yes, which is when they all go to the school.
Which we predicted would go horribly, and I'm not sure how detailed we got about it, but it did kind of go horribly.
It did. I think we were expecting more, confrontation. The only person Kokoro really sees is Tojo, which is the transfer student, but they don't really exchange words. There's also the Sanada letter we get, which was psychotic, might I say. The smiley face shivers down my spine.
That was wild, actually. And like, we can probably have a whole other conversation about Sanada, but yeah, that was wild. A wild move and kind of horrific. I don't know. I feel like the one thing she's trying not to address that someone wouldn't want to address on their first day back after being gone for so long is the drama that caused them to leave. Just a lot.
Yeah, so Kokoro's pretty much immediately like, get me to the nurse's office. This is what I'm doing today. And she does go. She's like, did any of these people come? And nobody did. But as I guess I predicted, they didn't come, or they did go, but it wasn't as simple as all of them just showing up January 10th, like what year is it, 2006 or something? It got a little bit more complicated than that. So Kokoro ends up going back to the castle at some point, and Rion is there, support. We love him, favorite character. And eventually everybody else shows up, and we kind of figure out, except for Masamune, he's the only one that takes a bit, but we basically figure out they were all there. They all went, but nobody else was there. So we're like, what the fuck is happening? And I was like, oh my god.
At that point, I thought it was nothing more than parallel universes.
Yes, and I was willing to accept it. I was like, that's still pretty amazing on my part. That I think you were the one that mentioned the parallel universes. I was thinking more direct, like, time difference, but even the parallel universes was like a stretch. And I was like, I can accept it. I can accept if that's what's happened here. It's not my entire theory, but it's still pretty much what I thought. And we get a long explanation from Masamune about what parallel universes are. That was crazy.
I was kind of digging it. I was digging the explanation.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of like, I was worried, right? Because I thought that's what was going to happen. And I thought it would be kind of cheap for like one of Masamune's games or stories to reflect what's happening in the castle. Like, because he thinks that they're all competing basically to save their universe, right? And I was like, it'd be kind of like shitty for the book to just follow along to another plot within the story. Like, it'd be weird and like not fulfilling. So I wasn't digging that part, but I still thought the parallel universes thing was happening. And then the Wolf Queen shows up at one point and she's like, actually, you're fucking wrong, by the way. And I was so dead. So funny.
I know, after all the effort. Well, it was wild because so much effort, like so much text in the book was dedicated to this explanation that I was like, fuck, I think it's this. And I was also going to be upset if it really was true that like only one of them was going to make it past the game, like their universe was going to collapse. So I was like, this is stupid. I don't want that. But they got me for a bit. I definitely thought that's what was happening until the Wolf Queen came around and was like, you guys are kind of stupid, you know?
Yeah, I still thought like we were getting some kind of parallel universe thing. Like, because I think she was just disputing the idea that they were competing to save their world.
Yeah.
But I still thought, like, thematically it was a weird choice. Because this idea of them coming together and then never being able to meet. And even Masamune has, like, a line in response to Rion where he's like, we can't help each other. Like, and the devastation of that line after what they just tried to do, it felt almost antithesis to this book. Especially if they do lose their memories. Like, it didn't feel right. But I was like, maybe it's what's happening here. But then the Wolf Queen is also vague about if they can meet each other and like all of this stuff.
Right.
And, you know, she's doing the Wolf Queen thing, you know. I've been a fan since day one. But yeah, she's being super vague on
She was
purpose.
being a pain, but yeah.
I mean, I think it makes sense.
I came around to her with, you know, the way the rest of the story goes, but she was being a pain. The other thing I was thinking about that was I was, when I was convinced that it was parallel universes, like even with the Wolf Queen's comment, I was like, maybe he's onto something in that they are just like alternate versions of each other. I was on this for a minute where it was like they're alternate versions of each other in their universe. So like not only do they fill the same spot, but they kind of just are each other, if that makes sense, like across the universes. Which then upset me because then I was like, oh, but that means that they're all Urashino, which is really sad.
Jesus.
But it ended up not being that, so.
I can see what you mean, though. Like, within the world, they're, like, fulfilling each other's space. And, like, part of what makes that a different universe.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, kind of like being... And the thing is, like, all the characters in their universes are different, given that they're in different time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Other than, like, Kitajima, who seemed to, you know, we didn't know at the time that she was just different ages in all of these, but like it to me it could have made sense. Like, yeah, like you're just this person in this universe the same way that other people in your universe might be linked to other people in Kokoro's universe. But oh well.
Yeah, there's definitely like a world in which parallel universes could have existed. And I was also thinking at this point, like which Kokoro I think has these thoughts as well, of what is a big enough wish? Well, you combined all the universes, right? And Kokoro, like, imagines everybody here being a part of her universe, and I was like, maybe that's what the wish is going to be. Like, the big wish is that they all exist together so that they can help each other. But obviously that wasn't necessary, so... But we could have existed in this space. There's a world in which parallel universes was how this story went, and I think it still would have made sense, to be fair.
Yeah. It would have not done super well with some other things, though, which I will talk about towards the end.
Yeah. Getting all of this kind of assumed lore that we're kind of accepting at the moment. We also get an explanation or like more insight into how the game is going with the red X's, which Leon brings up. He's the only one asking questions, coming up with solutions. Like, other than Fuka has some great ideas throughout this book, but it's like those two are kind of carrying this ride, to be honest.
Absolutely. Rion really picks up too. Like he's like, actually, I know everything, and he lets on that he knows more than he was letting on before, but he still doesn't even let on everything that he knows because we find out much more later on of what he's figured out in the situation.
Yeah, but he like takes this opportunity, and I think it's during the same instance where the Wolf Queen is just there, and he brings up the red X's that they all kind of found, because I think it was he or Fuka thought it was a key location or a possible key location, and it was confusing because there's an X at Rion's room and Fuka's room. They both have an X in their rooms, but the key isn't supposed to be in anybody's private room. That's not part of the game. And then we also get a list of other locations, which, like, we knew about the fireplace. Subaru found one in the bathroom. Masamune found one in the kitchen, and then eventually Aki finds one in her room. So just a lot of X's that don't really make sense at this point, but they're thinking it's some kind of hint to where the key could be, or something to do with the game.
Yeah, I was just kind of upset at this portion of the book because it was like, man, like everyone is really withholding a lot of information, like collectively. Maybe not any one person's withholding a ton of information, but they could have moved things along a lot faster had they just said like 2 words about things that they've noticed.
Yeah, I will say there isn't much like casual conversation about the game in this book. I feel like this is like the second conversation they probably had about it.
It's true. I feel like no one cares about it really, except like Aki. And I guess Rion kind of secretly cares about it.
And I think that's because most of these characters don't really care about it. Like, Urashino's wish is a joke, and he's, he doesn't care about it at this point anyway. Kokoro's wish isn't anything she feels too strongly about. Like, I think she moves past it, or at least becomes ambivalent towards it pretty quickly, especially when memories are brought into
like it's
it.
Unimportant, so.
Yeah. And then Fuka, I don't think we ever know what her wish is, but I don't think I mean, I could take a guess, but I think she also cares more about the people in this group. And Subaru, I think he was genuine in that he just did not care about getting a wish.
Right.
Turned out to be a character of real integrity, which was, it didn't read that way the entire time. Maybe because we didn't get any like one-on-one moments with him, but he was just an honest guy. Like, we thought he was up to something, but he was just a guy, to be honest.
Yeah. He was.
Yeah, so the only ones that really care, I feel like, and Masamune was the video game. Who fucking cares? He doesn't care.
I mean, yeah. Yeah,
so the only 2 characters really are Aki and Rion, and they have very serious wishes, right? And Rion, I think, knew almost the entire time probably where the key was. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming he planned to not use it until the end. Or maybe he eventually decided not to use it at all. But I think he was waiting towards the end, regardless if Aki hadn't pulled her stunt.
Someone did kind of, I think it might have been Kokoro, someone makes an assumption that he was going to use it. And I was like, that's kind of unfair. I wouldn't be surprised if Rion held onto it and didn't use it, Especially because he does confront his sister, right? Like maybe he was never planning on using it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think Kokoro is like understanding of why he would use it. Because wanting to bring somebody back like is a very serious wish, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's even a toss-up in my head as to whether he would have actually used it or not. They don't really get a choice, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I can see an alternate version of this story where he doesn't make that decision until he's in the room and like maybe talking to his sister / the Wolf Queen and like confronting her on the whole situation before deciding whether or not he wants to ask for her to come back.
Yeah, because this book kind of acted as like closure, I think, for their relationship in a way that could have been satisfying, but also I wouldn't be upset if he still made the wish anyway. Very interesting. We can talk more about that when we get into all those details, though. And then Aki, obviously, we can talk about her backstory, but she's, as we assume, desperate for a wish. And she pretty much rides till the end of the book that she is going to make a wish, like no matter what, if she finds the key.
She's like unrelenting about it.
Yes, for sure. And she tries to bring it up in conversation, like, we're all going to be cool if somebody uses the key, right? And everybody's like, are you being for real right now? But, I mean, it's understandable why she would want to use it.
Yeah. No, I said, like, in the first episode, I think I even said that Aki was giving villain vibes. And I think that, like, remained true. But in vibe only. Like after hearing her story and understanding why she's like really set on the wish, it makes a lot of sense and you can't fault her for it. But just like there is kind of like just a shadiness in the way she talks about it and like the way she positions herself, like her opinion of the key and wish situation compared to the rest of the group. And I think that in part comes from the fact that we just don't know enough. And I guess she like doesn't have to share more about that situation if she doesn't want to, but then it does leave us to kind of like conjecture about why it is that she treats the key search a certain way.
Yeah, because she's been closed off like the entire time. She makes one comment about unsupportive parents to Kokoro, assuming they're the same, and that's like the first kind of insight we get into her parents. It turns out she doesn't have parents. She has a parent, barely.
Yeah.
And her school situation, we never figure out why she's not attending. Like, we know she has a boyfriend who's fucking garbage.
Yeah, that was weird, that whole thing.
Yeah, so we don't get as much of her. But I guess that's also true of all the characters, but it just means that she comes across as, like, desperate, right? Which could skew into something more villainous because we don't know how bad her situation is. So it's not like a bad reading.
It lines up to the way she's described on the volleyball team, right? Where she's kind of
I think
you're right. Is referred to as a bully and like has kind of like a lot of passion for it and is, you know, told she's throwing the vibe off. Like it feels like the same thing. It's like no. Like from this perspective, she just cares a lot about this thing. It means a lot to her. From someone else's perspective, it comes off as harsh. Because they don't have all of the context. Aki isn't necessarily sharing all of the context, and so then you end up with a bit of like just discord.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that bit. Yeah, she is skewed that way. I also think it's a little bit of like hazing that was going on in that group, which is like, I mean, light hazing. We're not talking about dunking them in a river or anything, but like being harsh wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but like it's easy to blame one person and say she's the problem. She's the reason we're being so harsh, as if it wasn't like a tradition or like wasn't normalized. And it's still not good, but because she's hurt that she's pushed out of this group when she thought she was doing something that they were all doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she kind of just accepted that almost bully persona, and then she acts like she doesn't care. She dyes her hair. She gets an older boyfriend. Like, all of that comes across delinquent, comes across harsh. And I think that does kind of follow through in this.
Yep.
She's just intense, but
yeah.
She has a lot going on. She's got a lot.
Oh, for sure. That part of the book, like, just, oof.
Was upsetting.
It was upsetting, yeah. I was in, because as I do, I listen to the audiobook. I was, like, in the middle of doing laundry. And I think I, like, stood in front of the dryer with a, I don't know, pair of undies in my hand or something, and like just stayed comatose for 5 full minutes while I listened to that part of the book because it was just a lot.
I had to like take a minute because it goes into it goes into like enough detail where it is upsetting. Thankfully, not a lot of detail.
Yeah, I mean, my heart rate went up for sure.
Yeah, there is like actual assault that happens and is portrayed.
I wasn't even expecting it, even though it's in the trigger warnings, because the book had been like depressing up until this point, right? Like that was kind of a given, but like that was like it went to the next level, you know?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be referenced. I didn't think we were actually going to have an experience like it happening, and it was crazy. But we'll talk about it because there's other stuff that's like connected to what happened and blah blah blah. But yeah, for the most part, we're leaning in a group that doesn't really care about the game too much. So I think it does make some kind of sense that they're not talking too much about the key and like sharing information, especially because they were planning to work together and then they figured out the memory issue. So I think that idea of working and finding the key together dissolved in that instance, right? So I think most of them aren't trying to find the key at all. So because of that happening, I stopped being upset with how little they were talking about the game, because most of these characters in my head just did not care at this point.
Right.
So I wasn't as upset as you, but I understand, like, a lot of the information in this book is in the last trimester. It's in the end. So with everybody kind of giving up, that's kind of the energy of the castle, especially with the parallel universe stuff. Like, they're running out of time, they're in different worlds, like it's kind of tragic in the castle at this point. They're kind of just spending time together, and they're talking about their plans for the future, certain characters are obviously feeling kind of left out and left behind. Kokoro's still not sure if she's going to go back to Yukashina or if she's going to transfer. Aki doesn't know at all what she's going to do, so she's feeling very out of place, which I think adds to that desperation she's starting to feel. And yeah, she's just like completely locked in to the key.
Yeah.
So then what kind of ends up happening is what we did assume, which is Aki is the one that ends up staying behind and gets eaten, or gets started the process in which everybody else is eaten by the wolves, right? Except for Kokoro.
Yeah, I was a little confused about her in particular, but this is the reason, or part of the reason why I say nothing, like no words were unused, like everything got addressed. They did not bring up the eating by wolf situation for it to not happen. So, but I was just a little confused on whether or not, like, what did Aki experience, because it was kind of implied that at first that she was eaten, but then she was actually in the wishing room when Kokoro talks to the wolf queen. And then like also the wolf queen is, I don't know, I was like confused about the scene where the wolf queen is depicted like trying to extract Aki. Is that like, am I understanding that correctly?
Extract her where?
Like when she stays behind. There's like a reference because like the wolf queen is like in like described as her clothes being like messy and like looking disheveled.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unclear whether that had to do with her like being involved with the eating situation, or like because she was like fighting against wolves that were not her when Aki decided to stay behind.
I know there's the scene where Aki comes through the mirror and she asks to stay in the castle, and the Wolf Queen says that's not possible.
Right.
And then there is the scene where Kokoro runs into the Wolf Queen after Rion's bedroom, I think. And I think that's also when the Wolf Queen looks kind of disheveled, and she says, like, this is something that had to happen, like, it isn't anything she could stop.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you're conflating those two events?
I guess I kind of thought they were related, but I wasn't sure. I just guess I was also confused as to why they would be like, well, Aki got eaten by the wolves, but then she's not eaten, right? Like she's in the wishing room.
Yeah, that part I don't completely understand. Maybe it's that she was eaten, but like her spirit ended up in the wishing room.
Mm.
The issue is we have like a weird bootstrap paradox situation going on, right? Where certain events cause other events to happen, which causes past events to happen, and you can't really tell, what is, going on. So
It's a bit confusing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's possible that Aki was moved to the wishing room, or had to be in the wishing room, because Kokoro was always going to wish to save Aki. So she had that's like the place she had to be. Because she ends up, the wishing room is the grandfather clock, right? And it is important to the story. It's where the youngest goat in the Wolf and the Seven Goats, which is the actual fairy tale that happens. We can explain this more. The youngest goat is the only one to hide in like the grandfather clock, I think is what happens, if I remember from what I read. And it's the only one that doesn't get eaten by the wolf. So obviously, like at first I thought that's where Kokoro was going to hide. Other than the fact that the key was there, I figured that was the case. But maybe because we didn't want to do the cutting open the wolf to save the children, we did we'll save the kid from the safe space, which was the wishing room, which was the grandfather clock. And then that'll be the thing that happens.
I guess, yeah.
I'm like trying to explain it. I didn't think about it too much, I'll be honest.
I'm okay
so
with it not being like fully understood, and maybe like if I gave it another read it would make more sense, but like I'm okay. It's not like the most vital part of the story to understand, but it was just a little weird to me.
Yeah, that part was kind of weird in its entirety, because when pulling Aki out of the wishing room, all of the other kids are there as well then in that instance. And there's also the bit where the Wolf Queen doesn't eat Kokoro. Like, that whole bit is strange. I'll be so real with you.
Yeah, so then it is the Wolf Queen who's eating the other kids, correct?
I think so.
The reason why I clarify that is because that means that the Wolf Queen eats her brother.
Yeah, but I don't think it's like an actual eating.
Okay.
I think it's just like a
metaphorical eating.
Yeah. Like you're sending them somewhere else type of situation.
Because then they're also like buried under their exes, right? So it's like kind of implies that they're in there, but does that kind of also imply that they're re-experiencing the horrors of their life? Because when Kokoro goes and experiences, touches the exes and has those experiences, I kind of just assumed like she was visiting the consciousness of each of the kids which kind of like puts them in their own past, which seems kind of, I don't know, horrible.
Yeah, I could see it as like, or I was thinking like their consciousness or like remnants of themselves were left in those X's, but they were being carried somewhere else. Like they might have been like spiritually being eaten by the Wolf Queen. They were following along with her, even if they weren't conscious of it. Because they do all end up with Kokoro, right? It's not like they all spawn back at their grave sites. So they must have some type of movement. And then Aki also moves, supposedly, from her wardrobe to the wishing room.
It just feels insufficient. And all of the kids do seem like kind of trauma shocked about whatever it is that they experienced. So, I don't know. I didn't love it. This is the part where I'm like, it's cool that the Wolf Queen was like a human and like there was more to it than I thought. But I still kind of have a side eye because of the things that she set up for the kids. Like, what is this eating situation? Why did we do this? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of whys to ask that don't have answers as far as the way that the Wolf Queen did things. So,
yeah, I think it's because it's not entirely human. Like, I saw this as the Wolf Queen almost making a deal with the devil, right? She wanted to set up this entire game so that she could give certain people wishes. I say wishes because I have ideas.
Yeah.
So she needed to give up either parts of her humanity or she needed to join together with something that was more monstrous, ethereal, like celestial, like some other entity, right? Which I think is what the wolf actually is. But it's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation. Like it's a part of her she can't really control. Which is why she can't really stop the rules of the game. Like, they are implemented not by her, but so that she can put on this game. Like, it's out of her control, but it's something she needed to have done. So, it just seemed like a necessary consequence.
I could even see it being explained as, like, this castle was kind of like a toy to her, right? Like, there was, like, a dollhouse, and, like, this being kind of the toy version of her. I know it's a little more than that because of the conversation she has with Ryoen, but like, yeah, like maybe there is something to be said that this isn't just her or like is less than a version of her. Maybe something's altered, you know?
Yeah, because it's not, I mean, I guess there's a universe where it's possible where she's the one that could put this all on, but also it seems entirely unlikely. I think she's just an ordinary girl, and also because of where she fits on the timeline, I think she is also considered a player in the game. So I think there's other things at work that are out of her control, which makes her seem much more nefarious than she is.
That's an interesting theory, because I feel like, yeah, we don't see any of that directly, but it makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, Aki gets her ass eaten. And that means everybody in the castle also gets fucked, except Kokoro, because she's not there. By coincidence, she is hanging out with the transfer student, Tojo, because they're kind of friends again, you know?
Yeah, she's very casual about not coming to the castle in the final days.
Yeah, it's like the day before. I was like, wow, she's really skipping out. But I guess this was somebody you were friends with. They've apologized. Like, also, they're moving. Like, you're never going to see them again, so...
Yeah.
This was kind of a necessary moment. And Tojo has some great opinions about school. She's like, none of this fucking matters. There's always gonna be bullies. Nothing you can do about it. Like, it's just school. Which, I mean, obviously it matters a lot. You should, put your best effort in. And the situations that can happen, the bullying that can happen does matter. It has an effect on you. But also, do I think about my GPA to this day? Fuck no. Do I remember, like, most of the people in my class? Absolutely not. So...
Yeah, I think especially on this sort of social aspect, right, of, like, yeah, people behaving in certain ways. I mean, not that, like, I don't want to take away from anyone who's been, long-term affected by such experiences, but, like, in the grand scheme of things, Tojo is right. Like, this doesn't actually matter that much, and I think, who's the one who's doing video games? Is it Masamune?
Subaru wants to make them.
Right. So, like, Subaru is the one who's going to go to the technical high school?
Yes.
You're right. I feel like that kind of idea, that kind of path, like, fits the story of, like, oh yeah, actually you can just kind of just do the thing you want to do. Like, all of this, like, pre-designed structure that's being forced upon you is not necessarily appropriate for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Which I guess Tojo has a lot of good words to say about that too, right? Like, yeah, I don't know, just like everyone having their own needs and things that they want to do and not willing to deal with. Like Tojo kind of lets a lot of that stuff go. So
Yeah. I feel like that is a necessary conversation for Kokoro to have. Also, it's something she's going to remember 100%.
mm-hmm.
And then the fairy tale aspect gets brought up again for a moment because Tojo is kind of the one that introduced Kokoro to those things. Although I think Kokoro was kind of interested beforehand, but Tojo's dad is like a professor of these things, so.
Yeah, I thought there was something behind the scenes happening here because there's the whole like the Wolf Queen said that she's left hints for us like all over the place, which presumably means within the castle, like all the books that are in the room and like the wardrobe. I don't know. It seems like there were lots of hints that they just weren't talking about. But it made me think about that painting in Tojo's house because I was like, oh, is the Wolf Queen somehow involved with the painting that Kokoro ends up looking at to figure out exactly what fable or what tale she should be using as her point of reference? Like, I didn't know if that was trying to connect the worlds or if that was more of a coincidence.
Presumably, if Kokoro had read through the books in her room, she probably would have found the fairy tale being used for this.
Yeah.
Not that means she would have made the connection necessarily, but there were some hints, I suppose. And so Kokoro leaves Dojo's and the mirror like fucking explodes basically, which was wild.
Very dramatic. I was like, man, that's it. It's over. I was like, is this book ending with like someone doing the wish and Kokoro's not there for it? And then like the mirror explodes and next day she forgets everything. Like I thought the book was done.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, I was like, this is very unfulfilling. But yeah, that was it.
That wasn't it. We see everybody else in the mirror explain basically that Aki has broken the rules, and so they all ended up getting pulled back in to the mirror, and now they're gonna get eaten by the wolves. Rion basically he basically gives Kokoro the hint she needs, and is like, it's not Red Riding Hood, like, that's not the story, it's a different story, and then he gets got, so he doesn't get to finish. But that's enough for Kokoro to kind of go back to Tojo, be kind of weird, but Tojo kind of takes it in stride.
With her bloody hand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. And we see a portrait of the other fairy tale for the wolf and the 7 young goats. Yeah, I will be honest, when this fairy tale came up, though, I was like, oh, maybe John was right and the Wolf Queen actually is just evil, like, 100%.
Yeah, honestly, good point with the way that the wolf is described, yeah.
But she's kind of awesome, so we're fine. And then we end up going through all of the X's. I think the first one is an accident. She's hiding, I think, and she ends up touching the X in the kitchen for Masamune. And we kind of get insight into his story and see Kitajima was there on January 10th, explaining, like, they did try and show up, which kind of helps us understand why he was so okay with nobody being there for him. Because it's like, they really couldn't. And somebody was there to kind of explain that to him as much as they could with no memories, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
And then Kokoro kind of takes us on a ride that at first felt off to me.
Is it because it felt voyeuristic?
Which she explained. She's like, I'm not being a voyeur. And meanwhile, she's touching everybody's ex. And it felt very voyeuristic because I didn't understand.
I think she knew she had to, though.
Yes, she picked it up way faster than we did, or at least that I did. She got glimpses of things that didn't really make sense, and she had to prove her theory. It's understandable later. Usually, like around Subaru's, I think it becomes like super clear, and then she explains the other inconsistencies in timeline. But I was like, this isn't like making me feel good. But
there were earlier quotes of like, imagine if like someone just came through my mirror. That would be so intrusive. I'm like, well, what if they came through your brain?
Yeah, but the book actually does a pretty good job of like tying up its ends and correcting where it needs to. So the reason for Kokoro doing this, it does actually make a lot of sense. Because the only way she could really save Aki, which would then save her, which would save everybody else, which would allow them to save Aki, would be, to understand what's going on with the timeline, right? So, kind of necessary. But, yeah, some of the lives we don't get much.
I don't remember squat about Urashino.
Urashino, he was just kind of sitting outside. We do see Kitajima in that one, too. And Kokoro notes Kitajima is like old in that one.
Mm-hmm.
After that is the Subaru life. This is the one where I was like, holy shit, is it happening? Because we get the Walkman, but I was like, maybe they just like antiques, like quote unquote antiques. That's like fine.
It only like tipped me off the tiniest little bit where I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like maybe like, I don't know. It was very much giving it up to fiction. I was like, oh, maybe like there's like a more modern version of Walkman that like people use still, or like, I don't know. It's just like a reference. I was not paying the attention that I should have been to that clue.
Yeah. I thought it was weird that they name dropped it because it's something he's used before. So I was like, oh, this must be kind of important. And then Masamune's gift, like not working and him not recognizing certain manga, and things started to skew a little strange. Fuka, we got a lot of Fuka backstory. I'm gonna be so honest here.
About it though. Fuka's my favorite, so so about it. And of course she ended up the piano kid, because yeah, that lines up. And yeah, it was like there was much more to the story than I thought. I mean, I thought it was super, I guess, heartwarming, but like also a little sad when like there's the portion where Kokoro brings Fuka like the birthday gift, which is just like chocolates or something like that. And Kokoro is all like, oh, like I feel like I gave her a shitty gift. Like this is just like some grocery store candy. And meanwhile, Fuka is like, I never get any of this stuff because I'm growing up poor and I just don't get nice things even at this more basic level. So it meant a lot more to her that she got that gift. So it was like, oh, it's like nice to see this full side of the story, and amazing what sort of things would have happened if they talked to each other more. And yeah, just like the whole like the pressure of growing up, pigeonholed into like having to play piano, and kind of even the development of piano turning from her job, really, even though she was a kid, into more of a activity she had control over. Like when she goes back and plays it for the first time, and she's like, oh, this is like kind of nice since it's not a competition and I'm kind of in control now. So it was a good story.
And like maybe there is a world in which she could have been excellent, right? And able to like foster her abilities, but it is so true, money will play into it, right? Because it's not like you can pay for tutoring, so she can't go to school. And like it was extreme. She was having like her electricity turned off because it was just her mom. So it was like, yeah, at some point, if you're not like super genius, you do gotta kind of have to pack it in and do something else.
It's just crazy because it's a whole like there's a whole different like cultural thing about this, right? Like as far as getting into the piano competition world, and like yeah, like kind of using that to determine your future, because there's just so many, I don't know, there's so many paths to a life as a professional musician, but like this one is like super revered, right? Of like being a prodigy and starting from super young and developing those skills super duper early, such that you get extra noticed because you're considered special for doing it so young, right? You don't have to like wait to reach popularity and success. So it's just a whole different beast to what like could happen, which is like she could just become an adult and go to music school, But also like I feel for them too, because it's hard. I mean, truly, like becoming a good musician is oftentimes reserved for people who have the money to let that happen, right? To like pay for the tutors and like not do traditional school, to like pay for the teaching, that are associated with that instrument and the experience. And also I think a lot of times those competitions require an entrance fee. Like I don't think you can just join them. Like I think you have to pay to even be a part of them. So I kind of understand what Fuka's mom was going for and trying to sacrifice a lot to ensure the success of her daughter. I think the issue really just came with the pressure aspect of like, well, like if that doesn't work out, then what is this for? Because we literally can't eat.
Yeah, and then as always, there's like the conversation of, do you try to be the very best at something, or do you just do it because you love doing it? Like Fuka, I think, genuinely does love playing the piano, and part of it was ruined for her because it became a necessity. Like she had to be great because it had to be worth it. All of this effort that had been put in, it needed to amount to something. And I think people feel this way about like college all the time, right? Like you put in the money, yes. You put in the time, it has to be worth it. You can't change your mind. You can't do something else. And her dealing with that while she is like 13 is crazy. I would have a breakdown.
I mean, I hear it from my musician friends all the time of going through this, even as people who went the traditional route of like just going to music school as an adult and becoming a professional musician of like, man, like it really does drain drains the life out of it for a lot of people in a way that makes me glad I didn't do it, even though like part of me is like, I could have done that. Like, and then, yeah, like having to balance whether or not you want it to be your professional job. I also know people who went to music school who aren't professional musicians, right? So I don't know. It's all, life is very complicated.
It does seem though she is pivoting towards something more normal though, because she's actually the one that goes and seeks out Kitajima. So she's trying something different, supposedly. But we don't really get much in that, I think. And then to follow up, your favorite character is my favorite character. He's just a sweet guy. Also, he's got some family trauma, which, oof.
This one was rough too. I mean, his mom basically like blames him without saying so for his sister getting cancer and dying. So
she was getting really upset basically because he's healthy and he plays sports and things like that. And he even apologizes as a kid for no reason and nobody corrects him. Nobody's like, no, it's not your fault. They just don't say anything. And I'm like, that's gonna stick. And it probably did.
It does though, because then he takes the blame for things that he hasn't even been told to take the blame for, right? Like, and he kind of makes the decision to stay over in Hawaii, it sounds like, right? Of like, he wants to come home, but he refuses to say that he wants to come home because he feels guilty.
Yeah, it's a mess because his mom is the one that brings it up. And sure, it could be to develop his athletics and like get ahead if he really cared about athletics. But Rion sees it as like, she does not want me around. She's sending me away, basically, to be as far away as possible. And she'll make me a cake, and then she'll leave. But like, they don't spend time together. And so him leaving feels like a favor to them. And it also feels like a betrayal to his sister. Because
right.
Mio basically like asked him or made him promise to like stick by their parents and like basically be a family, right? Even with her gone, they should still support each other, which makes sense, but that's also a lot to put on like an 8-year-old or whatever. But he's not able to do that, and it doesn't seem like his mom is really willing to do that either. And maybe she is wanting the best for him, but like, yeah, how do you not see those actions as somebody hating and feeling bitter? I think bitter is used in the book. Bitter about like your existence.
Yeah.
It was heavy.
There was kind of a portion later on too where they're like, oh, it wasn't like really that, but I just didn't believe that. I forget what the exact thing they said was. It might have been Rion saying it like, oh, like it wasn't really just that she didn't like want Rio, and it was like feelings and complicated stuff, and like she still made him cake when she came to visit because she worried about him. It's like, ain't none of this good enough for me. Like it doesn't pass the test.
I think there could be a world in which the mother really did want him to like do something great, right? Because he is, I mean, the bitterness, you can't account for the bitterness. That's just bitterness. But with time, maybe she kind of wanted him to be great and to do something great, and then eventually it's really just like they're perpetuating their own problem, right? Because he can't say anything, and now she thinks this is what he wants, so she can't say anything. So they're just kind of stuck in this endless loop of being unable to say anything because they think they're helping the other one. But that's like putting a lot of faith in the mom being a good person, which I don't know if it's something we've seen really.
Yeah, exactly.
But if that's what Rion wants to believe, we'll let him believe it. But we do get Wolf Queen lore in this, or at least we get an idea that there are some connections to the castle going on, because Mio is reading the wolf story that we're involved in here.
Right.
So that makes 3 characters connected to fairy tales, with Mio, who we didn't know at the time was involved in this castle, but it does connect Rion and Kokoro together a lot more.
Yes. Because
they're both the fairy tale people now, which is super interesting.
Yeah. It was a cool little like like red herring situation, I guess, because I was led to believe that this story was centered around Kokoro, and it kind of wasn't.
And also that becomes an important point in that they're from the same time period.
Yeah.
And then we get to the last room, which is Aki's room.
So Aki loses her grandmother, and her mom marries someone else. I actually don't remember what happened to her father, if it's even mentioned.
I don't know.
But all we know is that she has a stepdad, and the stepdad is the horrible person in this situation. She stops going to school after the volleyball situation, which is after. I was like trying to put timeline together in my head, but that's after the funeral, I believe, right?
Maybe not, because I think the Gran was working out solutions for her.
Totally, because the Gran also knows about the boyfriend, and that happens after she leaves the volleyball team for sure. Yeah. Okay, we're putting Aki together. So Aki is like driven to stay behind in the castle because she would rather do that and like mess with everything than go back to the situation with her stepdad, and she causes all the things we just talked about, but also doesn't get eaten by the Wolf Queen, which I think we mentioned.
So we do get the stepfather, I guess, doing crazy shit, which we talked about, so we don't need to mention it too much. We get a pager mention, which was kind of crazy.
I did not remember that. I forgot about that when we were timelining things.
Yeah, she tries to send a message for help, basically, with the pager. Her boyfriend does not answer because he's trash. Mm-hmm. And then a random, like, pocket mirror basically shines, and it's the Wolf Queen basically saving her, right? Because boy, would that situation have been way worse.
That part was especially wild because the Wolf Queen was just, like, watching somehow, right? Like, I guess watching through the mirror. Because the Wolf Queen, it was giving omniscience, but, like, I don't think that's true. And, like, decided to intervene, like, breaking rules that were set. And this is, like, another situation where it's, like, I don't get why the Wolf Queen is able to do this if things are out of her control. Like, why is she able to, like, do whatever she does with Aki or doesn't do with Aki, and then, like, also pull her out of the situation? I don't get.
There's definitely moments in which the Wolf Queen can stretch the rules a little bit and what she can do. This was one of them, because the mirror shining, it was in front of an adult, basically, right? And that is against the rules. That's not supposed to be able to happen. But it was a bad situation.
It was a little sketchy because it did feel like he wouldn't be able to see it, and I think that was why they got away with it.
I mean, to be fair, this girl just randomly disappeared, so it's a little weird. But also Aki like goes back, and her losing her memories, I think she just attributes this to like somebody helping her, but she can't really remember the exactly what happens. So I guess memories just kind of get like filled in, like kind of covered up.
Yeah, like kind of overwritten. It worked out.
Yeah. But yeah, this is an interesting moment because Aki, she does want to stay. More so, she doesn't want to go back because there's nothing for her to go back to. So staying in the castle, it's less so about like wanting to stay there, and I think she is just at that point ready to die.
Yeah, I mean, Kokoro says it, right? Like that was a suicide attempt, right? Like staying behind, like knowing that her life was at risk. The shitty part is that it brings everyone else back too, right? Like, so just she took some people out with her.
I think she forgot about that bit, to be fair.
I think she might have, but also maybe she just like was at that level of not caring.
Yeah.
Well, then this puts Kokoro in a special situation of needing to. This is why she needs to even go through all this stuff, right? Because she has to. The only way she can even get these people back, Aki in particular, is to figure out how to get to the wish.
Right, and I think her wish ends up being, you don't care that Aki broke the rules, or something like that.
Is that what it was? I feel like she said a few things, but like I thought the vibe was just like save Aki, and in saving Aki, I don't know, like it kind of undid what she did. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the part that mattered.
Yeah, there were two aspects to, I think, what happened. One was, like, don't care that Aki broke the rules so that they don't get eaten. Another aspect, I think, was needing to pull Aki from the wishing room and, like, save her. So maybe there's, like, the part of Aki as a spirit, I guess, if they got eaten, whatever, that didn't want to come back or that needed to be pulled back, which I think is separate from the wish.
I think so, yeah, because there's a whole like almost begging happening where she's like, Aki, like you need to like grow up, like you need to become an adult.
And not grow up as in, like, get over it, to be clear.
Yeah, like, literally become an adult.
Yeah.
Which, like, it really is implied that she has figured out at this point that Aki is Kitajima. Did you get that?
Oh, I didn't get that, but I could see what you mean. I thought it was just, like, we're going to meet.
Yeah, to me, it seems so certain, like, oh, if, like, you become an adult. Like, to me, it was like, oh, she figured out that she's Kitajima because like she has seen her as an adult. Like she's figured out that this is the same person.
That's true, because she basically would have seen Kitajima in every life, right? Like throughout the years. She saw Aki, she saw her in Kokoro's life, and Fuka's
So
life.
I guess to be fair, like she's closest to Aki's current time in her own timeline.
There's 14 years difference, yeah.
Right. So interesting. Actually, it makes it even more clever that the 1999 year is missing because it gives her a lot of time to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the wish was, please save Aki, please forget that she broke the rules. And then there is a moment where they kind of have to pull her out of the wishing room. She, like, at the very least, she did not want to come back.
Yeah, she had chosen not to exist, basically, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a big group moment, and they all pull her out. And then, time doesn't exist anymore.
Truly, I mean, the Wolf Queen literally is like, time doesn't exist right now.
Yeah.
You're like, I've just kind of paused everything, and you guys figure your stuff out, and then I'll send you back. And then she's being all weird again, like, I'll give you a little less than an hour, I guess. And then, like, this is the part of the character I don't understand, but the sort of, like, not human feeling part.
Yeah, she was very uncaring as soon as they kind of made the wish, and it was all finished. She seemed very, like, ambivalent, but I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe it's because this is the end then, right? Like, what we know of when she's going to die, her time is up. So
yeah, that's true.
She's in a little bit of a different situation than the rest of them. But regardless, we get more explanation of what's going on, basically.
Yeah, they get the whole timeline going.
Subaru is from 1985. Old man. Aki is 1992. Kokoro and Rion are both 2006. Masamune is 2013. Fuka is 2020. Oof. And then, yeah, Urashino finishes us out at 2027. We get some nice final moments between the characters here. I really liked this moment with Masamune was cleaning up his games and Subaru came to help. And Subaru was just like, he'll go into game design so that Masamune can say he has a friend that makes games and it won't be a lie.
Yes, so wholesome.
I actually teared up. Like, of course Masamune's all like, I won't remember, so what does it matter? And Subaru's like, it'll matter. Like, it's still going to be true. I feel like
he's right, too. They seem to have some, like, inklings of memory, right? Like, they have some...
For sure.
They might not have direct memories, but there are, like, some permanent effects, so... Right, and we'll probably get into that with Kitajima, but yeah.
Yeah, so that moment in particular stuck out for me. I loved it.
I'll tell you what part I didn't like about this scene was Urashino being like, Fuka, let's go out. And she's like, actually, it turns out I'm 7 years older than you. And he's like, yeah, but maybe anyway. And she's like, I'm like, no, what do you mean? Like, why did she have to like it? Like, there's the whole thing of like her like being like, it's like kind of annoying that Urashino liked me, but I feel so like honored to be liked by someone who liked people like Kokoro and Aki. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No. She's healing. She's working on it.
She's figuring it out. I do kind of, I know this sounds weird to say, I kind of understand it a bit. Like, the kind of like gumption, right? To be like, this isn't going to work out, and we kind of know that, but I'm going to say it anyway. And like, I don't know, I think you've been really great throughout this entire experience.
Urashino definitely thinks it's possible.
I know, but he's like 13.
Yeah.
But I don't think Fuka thinks it's possible is the thing.
Yeah,
I think she's just kind of like playing into it as like a good final goodbye moment. So I can kind of understand her point of view. But yeah, Urashino, we didn't need to bring this back up in the end. We could have let it go.
I know. It could have been. I thought he had grown, you know?
I mean, impossible. He's a baby.
Ugh, unfortunate. And I like I said in the last episode, I was really here for the Kokoro Fuka ship, so.
Crazy to me. I did not see it.
In another world. Just not this one.
Strangely though, like in this book, I'm shipping the straights. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
That's actually a great point. Look at you.
And then everybody fucking leaves. Except, hold on. The main character speaks. Leon turns around. He's like, I figured you out, Wolf Queen. It's my sister,
my jaw
isn't
dropped,
it?
Actually. I was like, wait, huh? And like, not only was there no way in hell I was going to get what like fairy tale this was based on, though there was definitely no way in hell I was going to pick up on this.
Yeah, I knew there was something weird going on, right? Like, Mio had the dollhouse. She liked the story. There was something going on.
A connection for sure, but being the Wolf Queen,
Being
no
the
way.
Wolf Queen was crazy.
And there was like one reference to like Mio says like the phrase "one wish," and that was like the thing that kind of like, you know, my ear crinkled at, and was like, oh, that sounds interesting, but that was it. That was as close as it got, and I definitely didn't think she was the Wolf Queen.
Yeah, to be fair, she like promises a wish to Rion, and I thought it was more like she has her own castle that she's going to, maybe in some universe, or like she is somehow connected to the castle, but like as a player, right?
Yeah, I just thought it was a cute parallel.
That too, yeah. It could have been that too, but her being the Wolf Queen, crazy to me. But she is. She doesn't want to confirm it at first, but yeah, Rion kind of lays it all out and is like, while she was sleeping, or all of the times towards the end where it seemed like she was sleeping, she was actually running this, right? And then the reason they end the day before the end of March, it's not castle maintenance, it's because that's when Mio would die. And same with 1999, it's the 7-year fill between Aki and Kokoro's time periods.
I wonder if, because she clearly then knows when she's going to die by setting this date, so I kind of wonder if there is kind of a deal with the devil type behind the scenes thing going on, if that was part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Not necessarily a devil, right? But
right,
with some kind of entity. But it's because time is so loose in this, like, they're all existing so outside of it that her knowing when she's going to die could be attributed to that. Especially if part of her can eat the other ones and kind of tap into their memories and things like that. So
I was kind of feeling like it took place in 1999, honestly. Like they were all brought into the time that Mio was in, because she's kind of in charge.
Would make sense, because she doesn't travel to the castle, right? The castle's kind of in her, in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she's described as sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, I could see that being the case.
Do we think that Mio thinks that this was real, or just thought it was like dreams? She probably did think it was real, because it was so consistent.
Yeah, and I think because she knew she was going to be giving, like, the things, she said certain things to Rion that didn't make sense to him then, but made sense to him now, right?
Mm.
So I think she was very much aware that he would end up in this castle eventually.
That's a good point.
I mean, the castle was made for him, I think.
Yeah, yes.
I also think that's why Rion, before he leaves, he wants to remember. He asks that, and she says she'll try her best. And I think he is the only character that does actually remember. We don't get proof of this.
Yes.
But I think he was always going to be guaranteed a wish. Regardless of who got the key, I think there was always a wish that she was going to give him. And I think this was it.
It's interesting. I mean, because she was about ready to let him go. He had to come back and get this wish.
Yeah, he had to ask for it, yeah. I mean, I think it's also because he had to remember what she promised him. He had to become aware of what was going on. But I think because he and Kokoro were from the same time, I don't think Rion was ever meant to be an actual competitor. I don't think he was ever meant to fill that space. I think the way in which he felt out of place throughout this entire book, as somebody who was going to school just somewhere else, it reflected in the fact that he was never a part of this competition. This castle was made for him. I even think in a way Kokoro kind of was almost like a gift to him as well. Like somebody that he needed. And she would need him in turn. Like, I don't know. That's why I think in a future of this book, I think they probably would end up together. But that's the romantic in me coming out. It exists.
It kind of, yeah, I don't know. I mean, at least they are going to become friends. Like, I think that's pretty certain. I could see that. But yeah, it is kind of like cool to see the dream from the beginning kind of becoming reality here. It was more of a premonition.
Mm-hmm.
So Kitojima, who we were like suspicious the whole time had something to do with this, totally did, because speaking of people being other people, it's just Aki. So this happens like post forgetting what happened here. She's moved to become an educator, which feels a little ironic, but I kind of get it, because she's like, she didn't have a great experience of her own, and particularly kind of seeks out this opportunity to work with like an alternative school situation. Now, let me not mess this up, but like, is the person who's running the school the grandmother's friend?
Yeah, I think they start the project like basically together.
Right. She just like came out of the woodwork.
She did, but I think it ended up becoming that like almost classic. You just need that one teacher, right, who gets you
Right.
and who like helps you. And I think that's what this friend like fulfilled, and that's why Aki kind of fell into the same kind of profession, especially in an alternative way with what the school ended up being.
So we know she goes on to then like interact with a lot of these kids that come after her, and
Mm-hmm.
it does make me wonder of like how much she does remember. Like we get the sort of inkling she has. I think seeing Kokoro as the first one of like feeling connected to her. So I kind of wonder if she feels that with everyone, or if like there's like more to it. Does she remember a little bit more, or if it really just is that? Because we know the conversations that Kitajima has with Kokoro's mom of being like it's not her fault and like kind of like be gracious with her, which it feels like it could be informed by some extra knowledge. Like we do feel like Kitajima has some extra knowledge throughout the book, but now it's like the end of the book just claims it's kind of just more of a feeling or like a distant memory. So it's hard to kind of gauge exactly how much she does come away knowing.
Yeah, I think it's something that could almost be passed off as like really good intuition.
Mm,
I think that's kind of what's happening. It is
yeah,
just
that
kind of
makes
the
sense.
inklings and stuff like that. It is interesting that she is so sure with Masamune. She's like, yeah, they didn't like leave you behind. They did come. They tried to come. That kind of stuff is like very direct, but I guess like similar to like, I don't know what it's called, like a Freudian slip, but not in a bad way, right? Where you kind of just say something and then you don't understand why you said it kind of situation.
Exactly. I think she's just saying what she feels like she needs to say, and like yeah, isn't questioning it because it's working.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening with her. And then it also makes sense in the opposite. Why these kids feel like they can trust her is because they know her, right? Because it does seem almost quick the way Kokoro feels like she can trust her and like listen to her and like trust her judgment. But it's like it's not really, because you've been friends with this person for a year. So that is a long time to build a relationship.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I did like that there was this connection, like that it was Aki that was Kitajima, but yeah, it's I guess there's a couple things in this book that are kind of just left up to a bit of a mysticism, you know.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I'll say, which is kind of just random, but her husband, which is where she gets the name Kitajima, being like so sweet and stuff, I was so happy. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's such a small detail, but like her finding somebody who's just so nice and having a good life, it just made me really happy. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially having just come from seeing her kind of at her lowest in the previous scenes, it was nice.
Yeah. It was just sweet. It was just a really sweet book at the end. It was nice. I don't know what to say.
I agree. Do you feel like there were some like connections, particularly in this last third of the book, with like Midnight Library?
For sure. Like when I was thinking of ratings for this, do you actually just want to get into ratings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, I was having a lot of Midnight Library thoughts. It makes sense, like a fracturing situation, a kind of suicidal character, and like having somebody there to support you. There's a lot of parallels that are happening here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was also getting, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Angel Beats, that is an anime.
No,
If you haven't watched it, I strongly recommend. I was kind of getting Angel Beats vibes as well, just in the, how do I describe it? Maybe it's not words I can use to describe it. The scene of, like certain scenes I could picture in my head in this, of Rion and Kokoro outside of the school with the cherry blossoms coming down, and Kitajima or Aki sitting across from Kokoro, like certain scenes that just had like healing energy to them, right? Which really made me think of Midnight Library and Angel Beats a little bit. Kind of just that satisfaction and like peace in being alive.
Yeah, there was a quote at the end of the book, at the end of the audiobook. I don't know if you got it. That was kind of just about like mental health in Japan. So it was, the gist of it was like Japan youth are like generally like among the healthiest physically in the world, but I think they said they were the second lowest on mental health ratings, which I don't know what the ratings system is like for that, but just making a point that like this sort of book exists because of the mental health issues that youth experience, and like kind of addressing that, and apparently it's reached some pretty widespread popularity there, so maybe as like a signal of how much of an issue it is, but how much that people need a book like this. And I just did feel like Midnight Library was maybe just an adult, I feel like a more adult version of that for like Western audiences. So it was cool.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, I was getting just a lot of good energy, and like certain scenes made me like really tear up. Like the Subaru Masamune one was so small, and we don't see those characters again, right? But just that moment was, so we have no clue as to whether they did ever cross paths, right? Like, did Masamune ever play a game that Subaru made? We don't know.
I would like to think so.
Yeah, I would too. It's interesting to think about, and like there's so much of this book I wanted more of, right?
Yeah.
In this aspect of it, I did, like the characters interacting more, but also the after, right? I wanted the after more. There's a lot of after you could really explore, which would be really interesting. Especially with like the memory loss, but also the knowing, like in your soul, who somebody is and the connection you had to them. Just, it was just really good. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to rank it as high as I immediately felt in my soul.
Oh.
But I think I am. I think I'm just gonna give it a 5.
Whoa.
I fucking loved
5.
it. I loved it.
A 5 and a 5 from Taylor. This is wild. So for me, it's barely below. I was just gonna do a 4.5 actually. So it's because I really overall enjoyed it. I felt at around the halfway point of the book that it wasn't what I expected, and that I did kind of want more of like, I thought that the key thing was going to be more of a thing. It was going to be more of a mystery in that sense. But like the story that it was instead was super compelling. So it was like, I ended up still liking it a lot. The parts that I didn't like so much were like some repetitive aspects. I would say I'm like still a little shifty on the Wolf Queen character and just maybe some, she's probably representative of not understanding the motivation behind everything in this book. I think she just is the most of that for me. So there's some aspects like that where I'm like, I don't know if I got what I wanted to from those, or if I got what the author was trying to put down, but overall the story was really good, like meaningful, and the fact that it reminded me of Midnight Library, I think is a high compliment from me, because that's one of my favorite books for sure. So overall, I'm really glad we read this book, and I'm excited to watch the anime movie version now.
Is there an anime movie?
Yeah, we talked about this.
Did we? Wait, there is? We need to watch it.
Yes.
Holy shit.
It came out in 2022. We got to watch it. I am sorry to say that it has a 6.9 on IMDb, but I still want to see it.
Ugh, who cares? They don't know what they're talking about.
I agree.
I will say, this book is probably one that gets better if you read it again.
I would bet so. Yeah.
Yeah, because like knowing what you know and being able to go back and really look at all the details and like see how everything connects, I think you'll pick up on a lot more things.
Mm.
And like same with the Wolf Queen. I wonder how some of the other scenes will read now that we know like who she is, right? Like things might change.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially how surprising some of the things were, like the Wolf Queen being the sister, right? And maybe even knowing that Aki is Kitajima throughout. It would be another interesting thing to read a second time.
For sure. So good vibes. I mean, we've talked this book up basically the whole time, but we can still do good vibes, I guess. I mean, actually, I might just use what I just said as a good vibe. It would probably benefit the story to be reread multiple times, and I don't think it would ever lose its impact. Like, it's just a nice, feel-good book. Same with Midnight Library. I feel like it's just something pleasant to read, right? And they're not, both books, I think, are pretty quick reads. Like, they're not too long. Mm-hmm. That would be my good vibe.
You saying readability made me think of something. This isn't going to be my good vibe, but just something that I like. We've talked a couple of times about like what makes a book easy, at least in my opinion, to read. And sometimes that's like structural, like short chapters, right? Because that helps me like stay engaged if things are changing often, or like it's easy to pause somewhere and like not be in the middle of something. The chapters in this book were enormous. Like the audiobook I mentioned last episode split some of the months into 2, and I'm shocked it didn't split March into 3 in this section. Like they were huge, but it never felt like it. And that is like a big difference between this and other books, especially Midnight Library, which is a lot of short chapters, in that even though it had really long chapters, it was really easy to follow along. The repetition probably helped that, despite the fact that I complained about it. It's probably good for someone like me who tends to miss things here and there with the audiobook version. So I thought it was super, super smooth to listen to, despite the long chapters, and that's impressive. So kudos to the author for that. But my actual good vibe is just like how the author wrote a book that was kind of primarily about social things, right? Like about group dynamic and like growth and like trauma, and still managed to surprise me, like stun me with plot elements, right? Like that weren't necessary. I mean, they were kind of the social things, like in that the Wolf Queen was a sister, but like really like, yeah, like plot elements that weren't just the social dynamic were still shocking and clever. And so I thought that was a super cool feature of the book, to not just be like a social exploration, but also to like be like a story, not a story about key finding per se, but a story still.
For sure. And I think all of these kids weren't going to school, but the author did a great job in making sure every reason was nuanced, right? And different. And none was more like weighted necessarily than the other. Like,
yeah,
Kitajima as Aki wasn't like, your problems don't matter. You know, I had a horrible stepfather and a horrible life. Like, she was still very caring, because it's like, it's not a competition, right?
Exactly.
They're all important. And being able to talk about so many of them, and like I don't know, that's kind of impressive too. Like, this is how many children? 8 children, all with their own issues. I say 8 because I'm including Mio in this. All with their own issues, not necessarily as the main character, but we do get important glimpses into what they're going through and how they were changed for the better because of this experience. Even if they don't necessarily remember, but I think they remember enough that they will be better off afterwards. So it is impressive.
Absolutely.
And making it a fantasy. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Which is maybe why some of the details were a little lost.
That makes me particularly interested in the anime, because I'm like, how are they going to... Maybe this is why it doesn't score super high, because it's really like, it is a fantasy, but really it is about all this other stuff, right? So I wonder how that plays on a screen.
It definitely would have been better suited for a show, I think.
Yeah.
Especially with the way the book is broken up. But yeah, that might be why it scores pretty low, because it is a lot to deal with.
But I'm excited to see it.
But yeah, I mean, still high scores from us. 4.5. Wow.
Yeah, it's been a minute, right?
We needed this.
Yes.
To be fair, the last book was pretty good too.
Yeah, the last one was alright. So.
Okay. As always, if you have your own thoughts, theories, opinions, etc., 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 we're 5050_books on Twitter, and there's also the Goodreads, everything in the description, blah, 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 blah. Next time we're going back to historical fiction. Maybe it's a mistake, we don't know yet. We're reading The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. About halfway is up to, but not including, chapter 24. So that'll be next time. I mean, we'll see what happens, I suppose.
We're giving it another go. We can't count out the whole genre, so...
Yeah, I think this one's also a bit fantasy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, the last historical fiction had a little bit of fantasy going on, though.
Ugh, yeah, I guess. This one's also horror, right? We went back to horror.
Yeah.
So we'll see how much it is. See you next time.
Bye.